So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Nordic Pavilion here at the COP28. It's getting a bit dark already here in Dubai, but what we have now is the climate talk with leaders of the international financial institutions. And we have two of them here. We have first Odile Renaud-Basso from the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Welcome. And then we have André Küüsvek from the Nordic Investment Bank. Our concept for this talk is actually pretty simple. We have 25 minutes time, and this is not only to identify what are the key challenges to which sort of these IFIs are facing, but also actually how to solve them. So it's a pretty short time. So what we need to do is actually, I think we need to go directly down to business. So the first question, Odile, is that what keeps you awake at night?
Many things, no, I will start geopolitical developments. I think what's been going on in the last 2 years is very worrying, starting with the war in Ukraine and then now the situation in the Middle East. I think that we see unraveling, a lot of acquis of the post-Cold War situation and so forth. So I think this is a very tense and dangerous situation. And the second thing is, climate. The difficulty to address the challenge and the time it takes and so forth. And the third is maybe, the fact that, and related to the first one, multilateralism is, we are changing era and we don't know what will be next. And I have children and I'm worried for them.
Okay, so it's the geopolitics, climate, and multilateralism in trouble. Your turn, André.
Well, on this question, it's really hard to speak second. I would say what keeps me awake at night is, number one, the atrocities in Ukraine, but also in other parts of the world, Caucasus, that the world mostly completely missed about, and then, of course, more recently now in the Middle East. But in terms of challenges, maybe they convert out of those elements here. One is geopolitics, of course. And the increasing divide between the democratic world and then the world that is autocratic. And this divide and rivalry is not resulting well for the humanity. Secondly, I would say it's the coexistence of, or rather humans as part of the nature. Clearly, of all the species, humans have most power, and we need to think how do we apply that power to the nature. And then thirdly, something very down to earth, how to keep my troops in Helsinki happy.
Yeah, thank you. One common challenge that you mentioned was actually geopolitics and maybe more particularly the Russia's war in Ukraine. So how has that affected the EBRD and how are you dealing with that?
It has had a huge impact, and that woke me up for a long time at the beginning, because it has a huge impact on the bank. Ukraine has been the most important country of operation for the bank historically. So it was a big challenge for us to know what to do, how to adjust, how to provide support to Ukraine in a war situation. And at the beginning, it took a bit of, few weeks to decide, but then we decided that we will continue to support and invest in Ukraine with asking shareholders to provide us with guarantees and to share the risk with us, because as a bank, we cannot continue to invest, in a very risky situation without having a bit of backup. And this has worked, been very successful in a way, because we got a lot of donor support, 1.5 billion over time, and this allowed us really to finance, to increase by 50% our investment in Ukraine. We invested more than 3 billion in 2 years, which was a significant increase, and really being very agile in helping where it was the most needed. For example, I was in Ukraine in October 22. And we realized it was the starting of the attack from the Russian on the infrastructure and so forth. And then we decided, following this trip, to really increase our support to the electricity company network, so as to give them the capacity to rebuild, to buy the material, what was needed in terms of supply and so forth, to keep the network functioning. So that was, and now with this, we are moving towards a new phase where shareholders have agreed to recapitalize, to give us some capital, paid-in capital, in order to be able to continue to invest in Ukraine, whatever, I mean, for the war situation and the reconstruction.
NIB doesn't have any direct lending in Ukraine, but of course the conflict is also affecting the Nordic Baltic region. Could you describe how NIB has been affected by this situation?
Well, I would first like to pay, say congratulations and pay respect to EBRD, which has been a very significant investor in Ukraine already before the crisis, and has now stepped up even more. So really well done, and applause also to the shareholders of EBRD for the capital increase. Now, NIB, indeed, when the war escalated 24th of February last year, we had zero exposure at that point. We had some earlier projects. What we see, and of course the first worries that we used to have at the time was credit risk. That was on our own Baltic companies, first of all, as well as Nordic, Finland in particular. So we took a really close look at those exposures and essentially deployed, where necessary, crisis response loans to our clients. In terms of Ukraine, more specifically, we are also lending to our sister organization, NEFCO, or the Nordic Environmental Finance Corporation, that has a small footprint, small compared to EBRD in Ukraine, and hopefully can do more. And then thirdly, we have made it very clear to our board and member countries that we are willing to do more if the member countries would like to see us as one of these trusted agents that deploys, and then we would of course work together with EBRD and others that are already there with a stronger footprint.
You mentioned crisis response, and of course when there are these short-term crises sort of hitting us, we had the COVID, there was a COVID response, and then we have this geopolitics, so it's like one short-term crisis after the other. How do you keep the focus on these more long-term issues like the climate, why we are actually here in Dubai?
First of all, I think climate is not really a long-term issue when we see already the impact of climate on our countries of operation in terms of drought, in terms of floods, in terms of, real devastation in some areas related to increase in temperature. So we already see the impact, so it's a reminder. And we have MDBs, we have also long-term sort of tanks and long-term instruments, so we design policies that are there to stay. And we have, for example, decided 2 years ago that we should be fully Paris aligned, so all the investment we are doing have, since the beginning of this year, have to be Paris aligned, so to be consistent with the objective of 1.5 degrees temperature increase. This was done under the pressure of, under the request and the demand of our shareholders, and I think this is something which really have a very deep impact on what we are doing. The second thing which is very important, we have long-term targets, and for example, we have this target of having 50% of our investment in the green sector. So that's, and we've been reaching that already. It's a very important objective, and it really drives the way our bankers and so forth work on project in order to be sure that in each and every project we do, we bring this dimension and try to make progress in this area.
I guess same question to me.
Yes.
It's not that difficult. I think we are a bank with a long-term view. We take a longer-term view than most others, and I don't mean only the commercial banks, but in fact, if you look at the whole, political election cycle being too short, really, to have a strong implementing power by the governments. So we are somebody who can consolidate the priorities of all our 8 member countries, and we have done so. We have updated our strategy back in 2021 in December, and we have been sticking to it. When the war really escalated in Ukraine, we saw a significant increase in demand for our loans. So many of the clients that were relying on house banks and capital markets earlier suddenly came to realize that having a third element of that funding strategy, i.e. IFIs, like NIB or EBRD or EIB, is making sense. We are much longer term lenders than anybody else. So it's not really that difficult for us to combine the short-term crisis response with the long-term environmental lending. Environment is one of the two key mandate elements for the NIB. We have also set ourselves even higher standards now for the delivery on the mandate. We used to target 90%, now we are targeting 95 and delivering 100 basically. Yesterday morning here we launched our new climate strategy where we are setting very specific and actionable goals per sector that we deal with. We see also greater demand both from the investors that invest in our own bonds in the markets, and we see also greater demand by the clients to do more and new things that have a bigger impact. One of the examples, for instance, is the sustainability-linked loans, which is something where we stop looking just at the project where the money is going, but we look at the corporate as a whole, and we try to bring about change in terms of CO2 emission reductions, in terms of reducing the resources like water, etc., to the production process. And we are doing it really well with many of the companies who have been on this stage, even today, Volvo Cars and others that do the same thing. Thank you.
There has been some push from some bigger owner countries of MDBs that actually the MDBs should do more and they should be more agile and more efficient. So what is your response to that discussion, and how would you sort of increase the impact per dollar of your financing?
So, I mean, of course, every organization should always try to be more agile, more rapid, more reactive, and so forth. I think that EBRD has shown, and we discussed the Ukraine crisis and so forth, its capacity to respond and to quickly to adjust and to take into account a new element. There is a bit of contradiction between agility. There may be some trade-off between agility and impact, because one of the challenge, for example, MDBs have is that because of the very important objective of impact and quality of standards and so forth, our reputation in terms of environmental and social assessment, impact assessment and so forth is not great because it takes time. And very often, we are compared in some of our countries of operation with Chinese. Chinese bank can come very quickly, they sign the loan, the construction starts and so forth. We have months of feasibility study, impact assessment, consultation with stakeholders for big infrastructure projects and so forth, which is very important for the quality of what we are delivering and so forth, but it's also, it may limit our agility. So I think there is always a sort of discussion and trade-off between these different objectives, and we need to optimize. Our action under these different objectives. One important agenda I think we are discussing with other MDBs is the capacity to work better together in order to, to improve our agility, collective agility, avoiding duplication of all this feasibility study, impact assessment, and so forth. So having more mutual standards, or common standards, or mutual reliance in order to, speed up and simplify the process for the clients, which at the end of the day is what we want.
Well, I would challenge this view that MDBs are too slow and too bureaucratic. I don't think, frankly, we are. I think it's more important to get things right rather than to get things quick. And of course, when you want to deliver impact, you need to have conditionalities attached to your loans or investments, and that takes negotiating. And for instance, I've heard a banker saying at the credit committee that, hey, look, if we don't get the yes from you now, then we lose the deal and we are slower than the market. Here we go. But I would say I've never seen anybody who is faster than the market, and you don't need to get every single deal. I think you need to stick to the quality and the eventual impact. We do it day after day. We calculate our own economic capital that we need to put against the projects that we do, and we are actually very, very diligent. And also, maybe final thought on this is that the IFIs are not channels for the government money to be channeled to the economy. The IFIs are, I would call it even center of excellence to make sure that you mobilize the money, You multiply, you bring in the private investors and you scale yourself back when you can and need, and that you deliver what you have promised to deliver. It's not only about the dollars and the billions, but it's about the impact.
Where does this come, this kind of more pressure on MDBs? Because we have it. It was just 2 days ago, there was a report on the climate finance published. There was quite a lot written about the role of MDBs, that there would be fundamental change needed, etc. So where does this pressure come from?
No, I think the pressure comes from because the needs for financing are huge, and so there is a strong expectation and legitimate expectation from shareholders that we use as best as we can our capital, that we optimize our capital. There have been a lot of work done under the capital adequacy framework review, and which has been a key focus for all MDBs to see how we can better leverage. For us, it didn't have a huge impact, but still a bit of we changed some ratio and so forth. So that's the first element. The other element is, as I was saying, the focus on MDB working as a system, so as a way to enhance cooperation, be more effective in working together, push in the same direction, and not be all over the place. And the third is a bit, there is a lot of expectation for the private sector to invest more, to be more proactive, bring trillions. But then the private sector tends to say, okay, I can finance emerging countries, but then I need guarantees, and so this needs to come from the MDBs. And I think this is a too oversimplified discussion, that MDBs can de-risk the private sector in a huge manner. We can, of course, the work we are doing in bringing policies, working on improving the environment, the regulatory, in emerging market in particular, but improving the regulatory framework, rule of law, transparency, governance, and so forth is absolutely key to allow bringing private investors. But we cannot, and there cannot be expectation that we are going to guarantee everything.
Do you want to reflect on that, André, as well?
Yeah, I would like to remind again that MDBs, multinational development banks, are banks. That banks need to be selective. And I think the value added by MDBs really is that to the governments also, that not every road or railway or airport needs to be financed out of the budget, because then every euro buys you €1 of road or airport, or every dollar buys you $1 of railway. But at the MDBs, and I think, again, I applaud the shareholders that are willing to put more money into MDBs, because you do get the massive leveraging effect. On the MDB's own balance sheet, you get around 10 times, depending on MDB plus minus. Plus, then, if you also attract the private sector money to it, then every euro turns into 20, 25, 30 euros. And I think that's where the effect comes out of.
Yeah, there is, tonight there is a meeting of the finance ministers for climate action. Is that your message to them, or what is the message to the owners?
I think, first of all, it's very good that there is a coalition of finance ministers, and I think Finland was at the origin of this initiative, and I think it's excellent, because fighting climate change is a lot about policies, and subsidies policy. It's related to budgets. This is the responsibility of the finance minister. Reducing or, reducing or getting out of fossil fuel subsidies is, I think, a very important step in fighting climate change. The second big element is carbon pricing, and this is, I think, a key component that is needed if we really want to be effective in climate. There are also green transition and fight against climate change, because pricing is always the best way for allocation. And if you don't have carbon price, it's very difficult to bring external private sector capital. It's very difficult to have the return on investment that is legitimate. So I think there are some very important actions that are in the hands of the finance ministers that need to be further developed.
I just echo that. I think finance ministers are very important key holders to the state funds. They have the ultimate responsibility for the budgets, and the environmental ministers can go out there, the foreign ministers can go out there, but ultimately the governments need to share the burden. I think it's a really good initiative now. There are more than 90 countries already part of it, We, as NIB, we are an institutional partner alongside fellow IFIs. And I would say, the message to them really is that, you need to find correct incentives. I think things in life mostly happen because of incentives and institutions. And certain things can be regulated, but it's better if the regulation is basically just to set standards and incentivize, and then the market would take care and the private sector would come in based on these predictable, stable, eventually, standards and regulations that without private money, many things are not going to happen.
Yeah, finance ministers are of course not negotiating here at COP. What are your expectations of COP, more sort of broader expectations?
So, I mean, there are always two processes at COP. The formal UNFCCC process, which implementation of the agreement, looking at on that, there has been some progress with the loss and damage fund, I think, which has been announced. It was one decision in principle of last COP, and now the management of the fund, and there is already some money in, so there is still a lot of work to do in terms of allocation and so forth, but it's a very good step going on. I think there are a lot of discussion around where we are, the global stock taking, which is an important dimension of this COP, and then preliminary discussion on the new commitment and the form of the new commitment that will replace the 100 billion plus discussion around fossil fuel. So I think this is a formal negotiation track which is very important. And of course you have in parallel in COP a lot of initiative, announcement, creation of new instruments, collaboration and so forth. And it's a bit of a proliferation. When you are here, it's difficult to follow everything, but in a way it provides, I mean, this COP with very large participation of different players provide, important motivation deadline to be ready and deliver. And we've done some announcement with some of our countries in terms of commitment to get out of coal, to sign a global methane pledge, and so forth. So this is always a good opportunity, to move on and show that there is some progress in this very important issue.
It's really easy to speak second in this panel because you basically need to repeat the same message. Yeah. But I would say, of course, there is a lot of criticism in the media about the COP, and I think it is a very necessary platform. And it's not only about this coalition of parties negotiating these big deals. And I heard yesterday the Norwegian foreign minister saying, for instance, about the loss and damages fund, that look, at the last COP we agreed to have a fund, but it's better to have a fund that has money in it versus a fund that doesn't have any money. So, that's now happening at the higher level. But at the lower level, I mean, there are all sorts of small discussion, contact points happening which trigger action. I strongly believe that the agreement needs to be global, but the action is local eventually. And that is something that we try to deliver. We, as banks, intermediaries, helping clients to deliver. But it's also down to very, grassroots. Today when I came in, I saw a German guy there with a bicycle with massive bags hanging around it. The guy was cycling from Berlin to Dubai, 8,500 kilometers, and I felt kind of a personal attachment to it. And I said, look, you are a good man, you made it here. That's a point. You need to have lots of time for it, but since you did, well done, man.
So you got inspired. Next year you will do the same, or? Yeah.
I need to leave very early from Helsinki.
Yeah. Okay, hey, let's take if there is a question from the audience. I have the final question, but before that, there's one question.
Thank you. So I should start by saying that
yeah.
In a digital world, we have cabled microphones.
So I want to compliment NIB for this new climate strategy that you put out the other day. And I think there's a lot of interesting stuff in that one also for EBRD. So basically, we've spent a lot of time over the past decades talking about energy. But if you're looking at your new strategy, yes, it speaks about heating and so on, but it also speaks a lot about carbon-intensive raw materials such as steel, cement, and aluminium. And in the Nordic group, a lot is happening there. So in Sweden, bold moves to close to zero carbon steel. A lot of other things might be coming in that domain, cement and so on. I would be curious to hear your thoughts about where is it you really into this? Where is it you are needed to push what's going on? And how would you pass the baton to EBRD in the wider geography that EBRD covers on industrial decarbonization?
Thank you for the question, and good to see that a day after the new climate strategy was launched, there are people who have read it.
And it was not ordered, at least not by me.
Even better then. But I would say we're already in it. I refer to our updated strategy from end of 21. We have been pushing ourselves to take more risk, and we are taking more risk. We have learned now also over the past 18 months or so that the supply chains can get hit very badly and very quickly. So we need to make ourselves a lot more self-sustainable within a trusted circle of like-minded countries. And we are doing it, both in the green steel, in the renewable sector, and I think that's one of the beauties, that we really look at the value chain as a whole. And it's fantastic sometimes to see at the credit committee that there is a project where we are financing a wind park, then we are financing an electricity distribution network, then we are financing, say, a transport car maker that makes cars electric, then we are financing charging stations, then we are financing the road, and then we are financing companies that change these cars from the fossil fuel to electric. So we are already in there. We need to raise our game. We need to, of course, since we are a bank, we can only do it within the limits of our own capital. So passing on the baton, of course, EBRD does it in other regions than us. So we have only overlap, let's say, in the Baltics, I think on day-to-day basis. And then, of course, there could be a bigger scale for some of these operations with EBRD.
What we do on this, we start really working with countries that have very high emitting industrial sector, for example, Turkey and Egypt. And Turkey is a big producer of cement, aluminium, steel, and so forth. And they start, what is interesting is that they really start, the private sector start to be really interested and understanding that this is a big stake for them, because they see CBAM coming, and also they're I mean, as a part of the supply chain, they have constraints for their clients. And we work on low carbon pathway with them. So we trying to define what is a strategy, what are the technologies they can use in order to decrease and to move towards net zero in 2050. And on that, we will look a lot at what you are doing, because you are at the forefront of the technology. So I think that we are looking very closely. I mean, Nordic countries have been very advanced and probably much more in advance than what we can see in some other countries, and that could be a very good lesson on use of technology.
Okay, we promised that this is a short and sweet. So the last question and short answer that, okay, I asked what keeps you awake at night. When the sun is rising and you wake up, what gives you hope?
No, I think I am in working for an MDB, and with the mandate we have, and we can make a difference. And so I think it's very, I'm very enthusiastic and committed to what I'm doing, and trying to do my best in order to contribute to solutions to the challenges we are facing.
And I get fascinated by, first and foremost, what the clients are coming to us with in terms of their ideas, where they want to move the needle. Sometimes they need our help, sometimes they could do it with others. And I think that's the fascinating element, to talk to these people, both on the client side, but also people within our own organization that are energized by these ideas.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much, audience. Thank you.